everybody, welcome to another GMG review. Today we're going to take a look at Warhammer Underworlds Nightvault, which is the latest edition of the Warhammer Underworlds series of competitive play, board game, miniature game hybrids from Games Workshop. Now, this first series was called Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire, and a lot of folks call it Shadespire still, but what this is sort of, I don't want to say the second edition, but the first expansion for this series of games with brand new warbands, brand new battlefield tiles to play on, and some brand new mechanics as well. So what I want to do today, we're going to go through the components of the box, we're going to talk about what is new rules-wise, and we're going to take an in-depth dive into all of the new cards and models, and of course stats, I guess character cards that come in this box set, expanding your games of Warhammer Underworlds. I have to get used to start calling it Warhammer Underworlds because people have been calling it Shadespire for so long, but the new name is Nightvault, so it's let's get a game of Warhammer Underworlds, not let's get a game of Shadespire, as this does take the game to its next, I guess, phase story-wise, with new heroes and villains. So let's take a look at the box and the contents, and then we'll get into a deep dive into what actually comes in the game. So let's take a look at what comes in the box. Here is our copy of Warhammer Underworlds Nightvault in all of its painted and punched out glory. So components, a lot of this will be familiar if you played Shadespire. You're going to get a pile of glory tokens, a pile of damage tokens, activation tokens, movement and charge tokens, and guard tokens. And also, you're going to have, of course, your dice, attack dice, defend dice, and now new magic dice, which I'll explain when I explain the magic system. So, magic dice are a lot like attack and defend dice. They have crits on them, but then they have new symbols, which are focuses, which is the swirly, and channels, which is lightning bolts. And certain spells will, of course, need certain results. Now, there are less of some things than others. So, for a focus, there's 2 on here and a crit. For channels, it's slightly easier. There's 3 and a crit. So channel spells typically easier to cast than focus spells, but just like any other action, if you're looking for successes, you roll the dice and look for the appropriate symbol to try and succeed, just like with an attack. Of course, defense dice just the same as previous. You're going to get 2 new boards, and what's cool about the boards is they have things that were previously only in the expansion to Shadespire, which is lethal hexes. Now, lethal hexes, you take a damage if you are pushed or moved through one. If you stand in one, you don't take any further damage after that, but it does beat you up a little bit. And each one has a totally open side, you can see with 3 lethal hexes, and then a blocked side with no lethal hexes, but 3 blocked squares. Beautiful new art, of course, representing the Nightvault itself. And a great expansion now, meaning that there are 5 boards in play. There's the expansion board, the 2 original Shadespire boards, and then these 2 boards as well. Any of which can legally be placed during deployment in a match play game of Nightvault, Warhammer Underworlds, sorry. Then other familiar components you're going to see here, you're going to get some Shade Glass, and then, of course, Shardfall, rather, and then these are also Chasms, which are lethal hexes that can be played during the game from certain spells and effects. You're going to have 9 objective squares, of course, with brand new art, and then you're going to have this, which is a Scatter Square, which you would actually place adjacent to a model, and then roll an attack die, and that'll show you where it goes. So, in this case, it's gone to this, whatever it is would move to this hex, basically. It's a way of randomizing, basically, movement in the game, which is pretty cool. It's a movement randomizer. If your model was standing somewhere, you would roll and that would be the direction it would go. Or an effect or whatever it is in the game. Just a handy new tool, basically. It's the Underworld's equivalent of a scatter die. And then, of course, you have 3 decks of cards. You have Stormsire's Cursebreakers, which is a pre-constructed deck. You have the Thorns of the Briar Queen, the pre-constructed deck for the Night Haunts, and then extra cards, which you shouldn't open, of course, until you've played a couple games. We're going to go through those in depth in a minute. We're just going to keep going through the contents right now. You have 2 different teams. You've, of course, got Stormsire's Cursebreakers. There's Averon Stormsire himself, Amos Dawnguard, which is his second there, and Rastus the Charmed. And now these 3 models are all, of course, usable as evocators in AOS. So if you want to flush out your 3-man evocator unit to 5, this is a perfect way to do it. And of course, you got a cool, this guy could just be a Lord Incantor too, if you want a Knight Incantor to have a cool extra Knight Incantor. So what's cool about this, if you have this box set and you have a copy of Nightvault, and you have a copy of Soul Wars, you've basically got the rest of your unit of evocators, and you can also have him be a character until these guys get AOS profiles, which I'm sure they'll get separately, but it's a handy expansion for Soul Wars in general. Now, the cards. Let's look at the cards. We'll do that right now. Aberon Stormsire, there's a new stat line you'll see here. This is your magical ability. So whenever you cast a spell, that's how many magic dice you roll. So certain spells can be out of the league of a lesser caster who only rolls 1 magic die if they require multiple successes of different kinds. So for Aberon Stormsire, he has 2 magic dice. He has an Incantor's Staff, range 2, with 2 damage and 2 hammers, looking for attacks. So very cool to have a 2 range weapon. He's also got a 3 range spell. Now spells don't have successes, you just roll your magic ability for attack dice. So he's looking for successes here, he's looking for focuses. So basically there's a 4 in 6 chance every time he rolls a magic dice of getting a success there when he attacks somebody. And because it's an attack action, people resist it just like any other attack, so with whatever their normal defense dice are. Has a 3 square range though and 1 damage. Now the Inspire for all of these guys is cast a spell, and the Fulmination is a spell. So he can make an attack doing 1 damage and then instantly Inspire. He moves 3 with 1 defense die, which needs shields and has 4 damage. But check him out Inspired. So his magic ability stays the same, his staff stays the same, but he goes to 2 damage on Fulmination. And there are upgrades that can make that 3 damage. That's the most lethal range attack, I think, in the game at this point for his magic. And of course, it's a range attack, so you can make it a limited number of times per turn without charging. So it's crazy. And he goes to 2 defense dice, and the rest of his stats basically stay the exact same. So he's super easy, like all 3 of these folks, super easy to inspire. He'll inspire off any spell attack action, any spell that they have on their cards. So for instance, Amos and Rastus both have empower spells on their cards. And then any spell that's a Gambit card, because all ploys are now basically reclassified as gambits, and there's ploys and then spells, and they can both be used during the power phase. So Amos Dawnguard, 1 magic die. Charge Storm Stave, 1 reach, 2 attack, or sorry, 2 looking for hammers and 2 damage. Inspires off casting a spell. Has knockback 1 automatically. And then Tempest Blade, 3 looking for swords, 2 damage. So some pretty good basic Stormcast stats. Move 3, 1 looking for shields, and 4 wounds. And then Empower, this spell both her and Rastus have. If this spell's cast, you can reroll 1 attack dice each time this fighter makes an attack action until the end phase. So it persists until the end phase, which is great. So you can basically cast the spell first action, inspire them, and then they can make 3 more attacks, all with a reroll basically for the rest of the turn, which is super cool. And once they're inspired, you're just looking to start killing things, because linked weapons happens when she's inspired, and she gets 3 looking for hammers doing 3 damage each. So oh my gosh, so dangerous, so melee dangerous. Still only 1 defense die, but rolls of shield and dodge become successes when they're targeted by an attack action. So she doubled down. She's basically always on guard, and she keeps in power. So super cool, becomes a really good fighter. Rastus, much the same. Attacks the Charge Tempest Blade and Storm Stave, but the Tempest Blade actually has Cleave all the time, but only does 1 damage, and the other thing is 2 looking for hammers and 2 damage. Same defensive stats, so move 3, 1 defense die, and 4 wounds, and cast a spell with Empower. Whoop, becomes like this. So 3 looking for hammers, 2 damage, but Cleave with linked weapons, which is kind of nice instead of knockback. And then 3 move, 1 defense die, gets the same, always on guard. So rolls of shields and dodges or successes when they get targeted by attack action. And of course they have Empower still afterwards for Rastus. So interestingly, these are kind of your frontline fighters. He turns into a turret throughout the course of the game. And they're a very interesting in-between mix of the Vanguard Hunters and the Liberators from the original Shadespire. So they kind of do a bit of both. And here are our Night Haunts. We have the Briar Queen's Thorns. So first of all, we have the Briar Queen herself. She's the only wizard in this group, where the other one, all 3 are wizards. She's the only one who's a wizard. So only she can do the magical actions that are in your power card hand here for your power deck. Beautiful miniature, floating. I painted them all the same as my stuff from Soul Wars, of course. So magic ability 2, and then she has a 2 reach, 3 looking for swords, 2 damage attack. She's a pretty cool range fighter, a bit on par with Scritch, but that's really all she does. She just fights. She has 2 native dodge dice for defense, 4 wounds, and moves 3. But she treats all lethal hexes as normal hexes and can move through blocked and occupied hexes, but must end in an empty hex. So incorporeal, basically. Inspires by being adjacent to an enemy fighter at the start of your activation. So a bit under your control, a bit not. And then when she's inspired, 3 damage on the Briar Web. So again, great strength makes her a Stormcast killer. 4 move, 2 looking for dodges, and 4 damage, and still moves through stuff. So she's, interestingly enough, your fighter model, your leader is. It's a very interesting mix, because your survivor model that you want to have survive, unlike the other bigger warbands, is actually this guy, Varklav the Cruel, with his little candle. He's leading the way for the Chain Rasps. He's like their jailer. And he has a Watchman's Blade, so 1 reach, 2 looking for hammers, 2 damage. He's one of the better fighters in the group that isn't the Briar Queen. But his action, push all friendly Chain Rasps 2 hexes. He literally pushes the entire warband that isn't him and the Briar Queen 2 hexes. So because the Everhanged counts as a Chain Rasp, all 5 of these folks, and it's a push, not a move, right? So they can do it multiple times per turn, and they can still attack and do stuff afterwards. He literally pushes them around like a cloud. It's crazy. He has the same rule that everyone else has, of course, which is lethal hexes are normal hexes and can move through block stuff. And then same Inspire is adjacent to an enemy fighter. This is your in the rear with the gear guy who doesn't want to die. He gets to 3 damage though with his Watchman's Blade. He's actually pretty terrifying when he's inspired, so you don't really want to come charge him because he might just kill you afterwards. And that's really it for 4 movements. So he speeds up a little bit just like the Briar Queen does, and of course keeps the rest of his stats. Then our last character model is the Everhanged, who's like the executed fella who died unjustly. He is a Chain Rasp, but he counts the Chain Rasp, so he gets pushed by Varklav. 2 hammers for 2 damage. He's your more lethal of the characters, like starts with the same basic stats. Is a Chain Rasp, can move through, so always moves 4 though, and 1 looking for dodges with 3 wounds. Goes to Cleave, 2 damage, looking for hammers, and 2 dodges. And that's really it. So he gets a little bit better. He's kind of cool because you can stack upgrades on him to make him kind of dangerous. He's not as dangerous necessarily as Varklav and the Briar Queen are, but he's your I can maybe risk this guy to go out and do something. I'm not worried about it. And he has some pretty neat only him upgrades as well, actually, like where he chokes guys with his ropes. And then you have 4 Chain Rasps. They're just, we got Masky, Headless Joe, the Arminator with his like big piece of wood, and then Broke Tooth with his big jaw clamp. And they all have varying different stats. Their core stats are all the same. The move through stuff, 3 movement, 1 dodge, and 2 damage, so all the core stats are kind of similar. It's their weapons typically that are different. So we have a Nighthaunt Axe, which is 1 looking for swords, 2 damage. A Nighthaunt Club, which is 2 looking for swords, 1 damage, so like the reverse of each other. And then the Nighthaunt Axe over here, 1 looking for swords, 2 damage. And a Nighthaunt Blade, which is 1 looking for a hammer and 1 damage. Now when they all inspire, remember you can move all 4 of these guys at once with the Everhanged by taking an action with Varklav. So it's actually really easy to inspire them because you just swarm them all over someone. They can't kill them all. They get pretty dangerous. They all go to 4 movements, and everyone's weapon gets like slightly cooler. And they all go to 2 looking for dodges as well. So with this fella, his axe goes to 2 damage with 2 looking for swords. The club gets knocked back 1, 3 looking for swords, and 1 damage. The axe goes to 2 looking for 2 and 2 dodges. And the blade gains cleave with 2 looking for hammers and 1 damage. So they're not, I mean, on paper, they're not super terrifying, but you can't kill them all fast enough typically to not get swung on by 1 or 2 of them, and they're always going to count supports and stuff, because you can easily push 4 or 3 Chain Rasps onto a single model, because they can move through each other too with the pushes, and then just gain all your supporting stuff. So even though the dice don't look super like effective on paper, it's the fact that you can multiple attack a model. Now you might have noticed though, they have no way of resurrecting, so this is a risky business, crew. Finally, you're going to get your rule book, and of course this is going to go through all the core rules of the game, talk a bit about the Nightvault itself, talk about more warbands, and of course the stories for the 2 warbands in the box, and it's going to outline all the cool new rules, such as bring in things like Gambit Cards, so talking about what a Gambit card is and the difference between a Gambit card, which is a Gambit spell or a ploy, and those ones, of course, are new to this edition, the spells themselves. It's going to define all the new types of hexes and stuff, so for instance, starting hexes, blocked hexes, incomplete, edge hexes now are defined. Lethal hexes, of course, defined, 1 player's territory and no one's territory, across no man's land in the middle there. And of course, giving you new rules for spells. So like I said as earlier, there's 3 kinds of spells: Gambit cards, fighter cards, and upgrades that give you a reaction or action, and of course the ones that are on your attack actions or actions that are on your card. You have your magic ability, like I said, which is how many magic dice you roll, and then your types of successes, which are either channels or focuses. So for instance, if we took Averon Stormsire and he wanted to cast Fulmination at someone, they're within 3, he would roll his 2 dice, get a crit, a pair of crits there, holy moly. And let's say he's attacking the Briar Queen, she would defend like normal, get a crit and a support. The 1 crit would cancel the other, but then this one would go through and that person would take 1 damage. That's using them as attack dice. And then when you're using them as casting dice, so for instance, if you wanted to cast Empower, it will give you what your requirement is. You need to roll a channel. You roll 1 dice because you have a magic ability of 1 and get it. Now, if for some reason Stormsire had it, he would roll 2 looking for a channel or a crit because a crit cancels everything. And that's how your spell dice work. So that's the biggest of the new things in the rule book. Then we have, of course, all of your sequencing and stuff, game turn. This is the exact same as in Shadespire. So place your boards, draw objectives, place objectives, draw cards, place fighters. And in match play, of course, this is your sequence for the game. Your objective tokens, drawing your cards, putting your fighters down. You get your 4 actions per turn, 3 turns in a game. So really what we're talking about here is I guess a cleanup and compilation of all the rules that have come out so far with the addition of magic from Shadespire up now until the Nightvault. So there it is. There's a look at our box contents and an overview of sort of the new additions to the game, which are magic, and of course some of the new hexes here that are put in as well, along with the other new components. Let's dive into the decks now, and we're going to start with Stormsire's Cursebreakers. So first, let's get into the starter deck, of course, and this is going to be some familiar stuff. So just like the starter decks that came in Shadespire, they've given you some familiar cards. We've got some new art printings for hold 1 through 5 objectives, a new Supremacy, and a new Conquest. So these are, of course, objectives that we've seen before that are from the previous edition, but it's actually really nice to have extra ones. Believe it or not, it's really kind of a pain for a lot of the generic cards that are really popular to have to pull them out of decks and put them in new decks. So when you're building a Warband deck, it's really handy to have these extras that you might, if you're doing Objective Runner deck, then hold 1 through 5 you want to have a whole bunch of copies of anyway, because you're going to do it a whole bunch. So you get 2 more sets of these, of course, because there's going to be them in the Night Haunt group as well. And then some new objectives that, of course, are unique to their Warband, Measured Strike. There's another version of this with a different name and a different warband, which it's score immediately if a friendly fighter makes a successful attack action that deals exactly enough damage to take the target out of action. Devastating Blow. Score this in the end phase if your warband took 2 or more enemy fighters out of action in the preceding action phase. Again, these are like unique versions of existing objectives almost. Blessed Banishment. Score this in the end phase if your warband took an enemy leader out of action in the preceding action phase. Again, new name, same thing. You could double dip if they're not generic. I think there's generic ones. I'd have to look it up again, but I think that there's some generic versions of these too. Fight is 1, score this immediately if a friendly fighter makes an attack action with 2 or more supporting fighters. And then Harness the Storm, score this immediately if a friendly fighter successfully casts a spell. Of course, that'll be handy and new because spellcasting did not exist until this new game. And then we have some power cards that are pretty familiar. We have a new Sidestep and Confusion with new art. A new Great Strength, Great Fortitude, and Great Speed. So some classic oldie but goodies, which means of the 20 card deck, 1/4 of them are things that we've seen before. So now let's get on to some of the generics from the ploys. So we have Determined Effort, +1 dice for the first attack action, the next activation. And then Vital Surge, it's a spell. It's a Gambit spell, which requires 2 channels to succeed, so you can't cast it from anyone except the leader right now, because the other guys only have 1 die. If this spell is cast, choose a friendly fighter and remove up to 2 wound tokens from their fighter card. So some cool healing. And then we have, unique to the Warband, Gather the Storm. It's innate. If you roll a channel for the next spell your Warband attempts to cast, this effect persists. So basically when you do a spell and you get that result. Innate like a bonus success. Basically the channels will count as successes for whatever the next spell cast is. So even if it requires focus, it's almost like going on guard. Even if it requires a focus instead of a channel to cast, it makes the next spell also succeed on channels. Then we have Lightning Assault. It's a ploy reaction. Play this after a friendly fighter's attack action fails. They make another attack action against the same fighter. So basically the do-over card from previous. Cry of Thunder, Gambit spell, requires 2 channels. If the spell is cast, choose an enemy fighter, that fighter and any fighters adjacent to them suffer 1 damage. So it's Peal of Thunder, sort of, but to spell. Empathic Conduction, Gambit spell, if requires a focus. If the spell is cast, choose a friendly fighter adjacent to the caster, remove a wound token. But you have to be next to the person. And then Aetherwing Stance, friendly fighters have +1 effects for the first attack action, the next activation. And Storm Strike, +1 damage to the first attack action with a range 1 or 2 next activation. Super handy. You could dial up, what's his name? The leader dude's spell super high with Storm Strike. It's range 3, so it wouldn't work on that spell, but you could use it on a stave actually, because it does work on range 2. And then generic upgrade, we have Lucky Trinket. It's a reaction during an enemy fighter's spell or spell attack action. If the spell is cast within 3 hexes of this fighter, roll 3 magic dice, and if you get at least 1 crit, it's not resolved, but you get to discard this card. So basically the trinket blows up the spell and then it goes away. And then, unique to the Warband, Tempest's Might, +1 damage to all spell attack actions. This is the one I was thinking of, where you dab the leader's spells to damage 3. Lightning Whip, it's only available on Rastus and Amos, not the leader. After this fighter's attack action succeeds, deal additional damage to the target of that attack action. There's a reason, otherwise you'd be able to put these together and make attack a damage 4 attack. Well, Zeal, after this fighter's attack action that takes enemy fighter out of action, this fighter can make this attack action again. It could be any attack action. After this fighter's attack action, it takes enemy out of action. So you could do this. You could basically stab somebody else for 1 damage after killing somebody. And then Warding Blast, target all adjacent enemies and roll for each. It's Amos only. That one's Rastus only. And it's 2 damage, but it targets everybody. And then Corpuscent Staff. Spell action requiring a focus. If this spell is cast, choose a friendly fighter. Their attack actions with a single target have +1 range till the end of the phase. So he becomes range 4 too. It's amazing. And it's friendly fighter, so it could work on him as well. And then Hurricane Step, reaction after this fighter's attack action. Push this fighter 1 hex, but it can't be done on Stormsire, so you can't push him around with his magic spell. So here's our beginner deck 4, of course. The Briar's Thorns. We got some objectives, of course, we've seen before. Denial and Annihilation, both in the deck, and hold 1 through 5. So again, handy to have an extra set of these generic ones. And then we have, specific to them, Swarming Spirits. Score this immediately if 2 or more of your friendly fighters move through a hex occupied by an enemy fighter. Real easy to do, of course, with Candleman just pushing everybody too. It's all the chain rasp just floating through the bad guys. Execution, score this in end phase if your warband took an enemy leader out of action the preceding action phase. Treacherous Foes, score this immediately if your warband makes any reaction. Death Sentence, score this immediately if 3 or more friendly fighters are adjacent to an enemy fighter, the same enemy fighter. And that's super easy because, again, you can push with Candleman. You could actually score that and Swarming Spirits almost at the same time. And then Take the City, it's just unique to them, but this is a familiar objective. Score this in the end phase if you hold all objectives in 1 or more game boards. And so, yeah, that's our 12 objectives. Pretty familiar from old stuff. Some repeats from previous. We've got Confusion and Sidestep in the generic deck here, and then we have Great Strength, Great Fortitude, and Great Speed as repeats for our upgrades. New upgrades, we've got Grinding Earth, a generic spell. Gambit spell requires a channel. If the spell is cast, choose an empty hex adjacent to the caster and place the Chasm token on it. A hex of the Chasm token is a lethal hex, and then remove the token at the end of the action phase. And then we have Determined Effort, +1 dice to the first attack action next activation. Unique to them, we have Spectral Parry. Choose a fighter and put him on guard, so pretty familiar for Steelheart's champions. Drifting Advance, push all friendly chain rasps 2 hexes, so you can go 4 in 1 turn with an action plus this card. This push must take them close to the nearest enemy fighter. Again, you've got objectives that score off that. If there is more than 1 enemy fighter, you can choose which way they push. Vengeful Curse, play this after adjacent enemy fighter's attack action takes adjacent friendly fighter to action. The attacker takes 1 damage, so somebody kills your friend next to you, and they take a damage potentially and die. Endless Malice, reaction, play this after a friendly fighter's attack action that fails. They can make another attack action targeting the same fighter. Again, familiar mechanic. And Spectral Touch, the first attack action, this next activation gets Cleave. Actually quite a bit of Cleave in this faction, based on the fact that they are spooky ghosts. Let's look at the generic upgrade. Just 1, Escape Artist. Reaction after an enemy's attack action targets this fighter and fails, push him 1 hex. And then, unique to the Warband, Strangling Coil for the Everhang. This is my favorite. He chokes you with his own rope. A spectral length of rope lashes out, wrapping across the victim's throat. And it's a 3 swords, 3 damage, 1 range. That's pretty super dangerous. Gives him a pretty crazy attack. He's normally 2 hammers, 2 damage, so that's pretty good. Then we have Rending Scream. It's a Gambit spell for 2 channels. Of course, only the Briar Queen can do it. If the spell's cast, each adjacent enemy fighter takes a damage. Chill Touch, rolls of dodge are not successes for defense made during attack actions for the chain rasp. So kind of handy once the models in this box inspire, because they're normally all shields anyway. So it doesn't do a lot, but when they inspire, they're basically always on guard, and it cancels their guard. Better against other warbands. Driven by Hatred, +1 dice to the attack action when they charge. Sadistic Strike. This is only for Varklov. And it's if the target has any wound tokens, this attack action deals +2 damage. So 1 damage, but 3 damage if they have wound tokens, and it's 3 looking for hammer, so it's pretty accurate. Curse of Unbinding for the Briar Queen. Turn enemy fighter's spell attack action. If the spell is cast and the cast within 3 hexes, roll a die. On a roll of a focus, it's not cast and not resolved. So basically a 4+ cancel for all spells in the 3. And then Creeping Terror. After this fighter makes a move action, roll an attack dice. For the first enemy action they move through, on a hammer or crit, they take a damage. So basically your pass-throughs then cause damage, which is super handy. So let's take a look at the generic cards, or the extra cards pack. So for objectives, we're pretty familiar with these ones: Annihilation, Conquest, Denial, and Supremacy. An extra copy of each in here. And then for the Briar Queen's Warband, we have as Nagash commands. Score on the first end phase if no enemy fighters are holding objectives, you get 2. Drag them down, scores immediately if 3 or more friendly fighters made a successful attack action this phase for 2. Vengeful Advance, score this in the end phase if all surviving fighters are in your opponent's territory for 1. And Vengeful Dead, score this in the end phase if all surviving friendly fighters, at least 3, are inspired. So if you live with at least 3 folk. And then we have Heavily Armed for the Stormcast. Score this in the end phase if 3 or more friendly fighters have at least 1 upgrade. So everyone has to live, and they all have to have 1 upgrade. Magical Supremacy, scores in the end phase if your warband successfully casts 2 or more spells in preceding action phase. That one's real easy to get with your boss, because he's just going to stand zapping people pretty much. Overwhelming Storm, scores in the end phase if you have more surviving fighters than your opponent. Not easy for Stormcast. And Purify the Earth, scores in the end phase if you hold an objective held by an enemy fighter at the beginning of the round for 2. For Gambit cards, you're going to get second copies of Vital Surge, Lucky Trinket, Grinding Earth, and Escape Artist that are variously in the 2 other decks. And then for the Briar Queen, we're going to get Sudden Appearance. It's just a regular ploy gambit. Choose a friendly fighter and place them on any starting hex. You can move someone around. Grasping Chains. Each friendly chain rasp providing support in the first attack action is considered 2 supporting fighters. That's pretty cool. This is a spell. Howling Vortex requires a focus. If it's cast, push all enemy fighters 1 hex. Interesting. So it's kind of an earthquake, but only for enemy fighters. And you need to cast it on a single focus. So your boss wants to be casting that one. That's a pretty great spell, and it's only for the Night Haunts. And we have Maddening Cackle. Reaction, place after enemy fighter's attack action that fails. The fighter is no longer inspired and cannot be inspired. This effect persists. So this is that you can have 2 of these now in your deck. So this is a generic 1/2 to uninspire somebody. And then finally we have Inescapable Vengeance, your first upgrade for them for the Briar Queen. When this fighter makes a move or charge action, instead of moving them normally, you can place them on any starting hex. So she just bamps around the table. That's terrifying. Then Grasping Thorns. After this fighter's successful attack action, you can push the target of that attack action up to 2 hexes. They must end this push adjacent to this fighter. Shacklegeist Chains. This is only for Varklov. When this fighter's attack action takes enemy fighter out of action, gain 1 additional glory point. Again, he's in the rear with the gear, though, so I don't know how good that is. And then Face of Death for a Chain Rasp reaction during an adjacent fighter's attack action. Before any dice are rolled, roll a defense die. On a shield or crit, your opponent rolls 1 fewer dice to attack. It's kind of handy, but again, only for 1 of your Chain Rasps. So because he's a Chain Rasp, the Hanged actually would probably like that one. And let's look at Gambit ploys for the Stormcast and spells. Stormward Reaction. Play this during an enemy fighter's roll or spell attack action. If the spell is cast, roll a magic die. On a focus, that spell is not cast, not resolved. And then Safeguard Spirits. Reaction. Play this after an attack action or gambit that takes friendly adjacent or other fighter out of action. Friendly fighter adjacent to another friendly fighter of action. Your opponent doesn't score any glory points for taking that fighter of action. That's cool. And that could actually trickle down. So anything that you would score off taking out of action, including like actual objectives, not just the one you get for killing someone, would no longer trigger off that card. So that's pretty cool. That could cancel a lot if they kill your leader. Lightning Step, the first friendly fighter to make a move or charge in this activation can move through occupied and blocked hexes, but they must end on a move, so basically you can turn into a ghost. And Chain Lightning, Gambit spell, requires a focus. If the spell's cast, scatter 3 from the caster's hex. That's scatter things for. Enemy fighter in a hex in the chain suffers 1 damage. And then finally, we got some upgrades, only for the Stormcast. Blessed Blade, it's 1 range, 2 and 2, but it has Cleave, only for Stormsire, so the sword gets better. Disarming Blow, reaction only for Rassus or Amos. After an attack action made by an enemy adjacent fighter that targets this fighter and fails, roll a defense die. On a shield or crit, select an attack action upgrade for the attacking fighter, and that upgrade is discarded, so you can shatter somebody's upgrade. Eye of the Storm, Wizards of the Sacrosanct Chamber get innate channel. So you can just auto-cast certain things that have channel on them. That's pretty great. And then finally, Stunning Blow for Rassus or Amos. Reaction after an attack action made by an adjacent enemy fighter that targets this fighter and fails. Roll a defense die. On a roll of a shield or a crit, place a charge token next to the attacking fighter. So yeah, so this one I think probably, I don't know why, it came creased out of the box, unfortunately. So I don't have to sleeve them. But this right here is probably the best upgrade of the bunch, because getting innate, always succeed on that, and putting that in your boss means he just doesn't fail to cast his crazy spell anymore. And so there's a good look through of everything in the box, including all of the cards that come in the new faction deck for the Briar Queen's Thorns and Stormstar's Cursebreakers. And so we've got one more sort of thing that's a cool preview, is we've seen the 6 pieces of art now for 6 more warbands. They're going to be part of the Nightvault release. There's 2 for Order, 2 for Chaos, and 2 for Destruction, but interestingly no more for Death. Although I think there might be a reveal for that, because I have a feeling I know what 2 of the warbands are, but that they're already out, and some people might have already painted them. I have a sneaking suspicion that the Banshees and the basic line troops, the easy to build boxes, might already be warbands that you guys have painted, and they might just release card decks for them later on. I have a sneaking suspicion that's the case, but we'll see. But for Order, we've got some Sylvaneth coming out. Beautiful art piece for them, of course, based on the sort of like, they're not quite undead elves, but they're the elven spirits that are sort of half trapped in trees. And then we have some Kradron Overlords, so I'm really stoked about, because I wanted to paint them for a long time, but I didn't want to do an army for them. I just wanted to paint some of the models, so painting a 4-man warband for them is going to be a lot of fun. Then for Chaos, some Tzeentch Arcanites to go with, of course, all of your cool Silver Tower / Tzeentch AOS stuff. And the Dark Oath, finally a little unit of Dark Oath Marauders, who have basically they're the slaves to darkness, I guess what we're calling Marauders now, the Dark Oath tribes. And those models are going to be super cool as well. There's a War Queen and all of her sort of minions. And then finally, of course, for Destruction, there is a Troggoth. Seriously, a Troggoth faction. It's all little monsters. The Squidgens in there, so the flying squig, mushroom monster, and of course little rock monster too in the art, which is super cool. And then finally there's going to be some Moon Clan. And the Moon Clan, I think I might be the most excited about it, because they look very Labyrinth Goblin, Brian Froud sort of inspired. And of course the leader having his own little mushroom roaster on his back is pretty cool, along with a Fanatic and of course some more squigs and stuff too. So interesting, 6 more releases already there in the art for us to check out and kind of imagine. We've seen some of the models already, of course, on Warhammer Community. And of course, now you can watch me play a game with Jason. We're going to run through and play a match play round with the 2 new warbands. That will pop up right here, so you can check out the gameplay. And of course, we'll have more Shadespire happening in the future as stuff comes out. So big thanks to Games Workshop for sending this along for me to check out, and for you guys for watching. We'll see you for more reviews in the future. Till next time on Ash, have a game. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to support the channel, of course, like and subscribe and hit the little bell below so you get notifications when I post future content. I do post stuff 7 days a week. If you want to support the channel further, you can, of course, buy a t-shirt through Spreadshirts, buy a measuring gauge or objective markers from Deathbed Designs, or, of course, most importantly, there is Patreon. Patreon is what makes all this possible, keeps the lights on, pays for the studio costs, pays for the equipment, model costs, and everything else, and most importantly, puts food in my kids' bellies and a roof over their heads. Big thanks to everyone, past, future, who supported me. I do this stuff because of you guys, and of course, I will continue doing it as long as I can.